Good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention? We're going to get going because we have a Budget and Finance Committee starting at 10 o'clock in this room. So we'll begin the Public Safety Committee for today, December 13th, 2010, the last one of the 2010 year. That's good for me and good for you. I'm joined by Councilman Reyes and Councilman Smith, the chairman. We will be joined by two of our colleagues shortly, but we're going to get going because we're short of time. So for the time being, we will be operating anything we take action on will be at the direction of the chair. And when we got a third member here as a quorum, then we'll take official action if we need to on anything else. With that, Mr. White, with Mr. Reyes' concurrence, we will move items 1 through 4 as consent items. If you're here on any of those items, you're free to leave. We will move them with a recommendation of the chair to the council. Next available agenda, and take up right away item number 5. As a courtesy, we do have a number of cards just on public comment. So why don't we go ahead and take those now, and then we'll delve into the police department issue. So the following people, if you please come forward. You have a couple minutes. Nathan Schmidt, Scott Weber, Arian Wingfield, and Jose Higuera. Please sit at the table there. Good morning. State your name, and the microphone's yours.
All right. My name is Nathan Schmidt. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I know you guys are very busy. So we are part of the recruit class that started the hiring process for LA City Fire Department in 2008. We were selected for the Fire Academy in 2009. We were scheduled for 2 academies 3 months apart that were subsequently canceled due to the financial crisis. And unfortunately, our interviews, as far as personnel is concerned, expired. We did not expire because there was ongoing academies or because we were low on the list. We were the top 50 candidates for the upcoming academy on a new list, and what we would like is for us to not expire, because we didn't expire because we were low on the list. We were the top candidates. So that's pretty much what we would like to do. Is we went to 2 practice academies. We know exactly physically. Well, we have a really good idea physically what is required of us in the fire academy. We're the only recruit class that's ever done that. So I think that we really have a good understanding of what's expected of us, and we just like our shot at the fire academy.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Wingfield, and again, I was also selected to go into the Fire Academy in July of last year. And our concern, like Nate was saying, is that we just don't want to expire from the process. When everything gets going again, we know the budget situation in the city right now, and when the process with the fire department begins again, the hiring process in the fire academies, we just want to, if at all possible, be able to start where we left off, which is waiting on an academy class.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Scott Weber. I'm also a recruit with the Los Angeles City Fire Department. Just reiterate what my fellow recruits stated. We all are well aware of the financial crisis facing the city, and because the city has already invested in so much in us, we've all been through multiple background checks because of our time that we spent on the list, multiple physicals. We attended 2 of the scheduled drill tower orientation classes, which were all-day sessions at the tower. So we're well aware of the demands of the job, and we've all met or exceeded the expectations. So I think what we want to express today is just that it's in the city's best interest as well as ours, because of the financial crisis, not to have to reinvest money, starting people at square one. We're a known quantity. We've already been well vetted by the city, and we hope that you will consider extending the deadline on the expiration of our list. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jose Higuera. I'm also one of the recruits for the Los Angeles Fire Department. Been in the process since December in 2007, so 3 years now. And like I said, we've invested a lot of time in being the top candidates for the fire department. There's a lot of strenuous work that we have to do to get there, as far as keep our certifications up and test high enough to get a job offer from the city. So we're asking the council members as well as the public to help us and continue with the Los Angeles Fire Department and the city of Los Angeles because of the time invested that we have as well as the time invested that the city has. And we want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I'll give you good news and bad news, okay?
Sure.
The good news is there is a precedent for the city doing that, extending a list in these kind of times, and so that is not impossible. We appreciate the work you put in just getting to where you are. The bad news is the wrong committee. The good news, the second good news is the Budget Committee, which meets here at 10 o'clock, is the one of the two committees that will make those kind of decisions. And the other one is the Personnel Committee, and that is the Personnel Department, and the Personnel General Manager will be here at 10 o'clock. And so if you hang around, or one of you hang around, we could introduce you to them and talk to them about how we go about extending that list. But this isn't the committee that does that, unfortunately. So whoever told you to come to this committee, good idea, the wrong committee. But hang around about 45 minutes, and we'll have a chance to do this again, okay?
Okay,
No
thank you very
problem.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your willingness to serve us.
Thank you.
Let's continue with the public's comment. Phyllis Doherty wants to talk about animals, probably. I don't know how I guessed that at all.
Thank you so much, Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement, and thank you for allowing us to go to Mr. Sorrell's funeral last week. That was very nice of you. I want to bring up a couple of things to you. I realize it's not on your agenda. It may come back. First of all, that the SCVMA issued their notice that they do not approve more than 5 animals per household. There was some kind of lack of understanding, and in the general manager's report, she put that they approved with 1,500 members, 5 dogs and 5 cats. They're very clear, and I gave you a copy of it. And I spoke with Dr. Weinstein, that they only approved 5 total animals, which is actually less than we have now for safety and health. And I gave you some information. I want to just beg you, for the sake of the dogfighting situation all over the country, please do not increase the number of animals that dogfighters can have right now. It is an epidemic. Detroit has gone crazy. New Orleans, people can't go in the streets. I don't want us to be like that. Animal control officers took a poll on this. They're very opposed to it. Mrs. Barnett said they will not share their list with her, and that's understandable. And I want to remind you of one more thing, that right now if we have a bad fire or a bad earthquake, the new district manager that was hired has 1.5 years of animal control experience, not management. He used to work here. It's a long time ago. Mrs. Barnett has none. The morale of our forces, of our staff, is the lowest it's ever been. They used to get up in the middle of the night if there was an earthquake or a fire, get their clothes on and come down even though they weren't on the clock. I'm afraid those days are over. Their morale is gone, and they're not going to be making that kind of an effort. So I just want you to know how severe the situation is for us in the event that we really have an emergency and the animal staffing. Thank you.
Thank you. And just FYI for you, because that has been kicking around here for months, it appears, according to the city attorney, that the change from 3 to 5 or whatever we choose to do is vested in the planning department.
Absolutely.
Not in this committee, after all. And so Mr. Reyes has been given the unfortunate task of moving it over to Plum, and hearing from the city attorney on that.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, it does. It changes the entire structure
Don't
of
get
our
on
city.
my wrong side again, whatever you do.
Yeah, we're basically putting a kennel in every backyard, so it's good that you've done that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, that concludes public comment. Let's move to item number 5.
Item 5, Board of Police
You're on
Commissioners
5.
reports and CAO report relative to options for the police department staffing and operation of the Metropolitan Detention Center.
CAO reports, so I guess I'll begin. Matt Crawford for the Office of the CAO. The report in front of you is our evaluation of the various plans that have come out for opening the Metropolitan Detention Center. The issue at hand, as you are aware, has been that the new facility requires significantly larger staffing and resources for other departments than the police department as well. Rather than read through all the issues, which I believe you guys are actually relatively aware. Ultimately, our recommendation in this report is two-part, letting the council kind of determine the ultimate question of staffing. The two choices on the table are open the jail using sworn officers, as the police department has recently proposed, and that would be effective, I believe, January 30th, DP2. And the other choice would, in front of the council that we costed out, would be to open it at essentially the same time, but hire civilian detention officers instead of putting police officers in the jail. The upside of using sworn officers is that we do not have to hire any additional staff in the police department, which then saves the city money, which obviously we all know the city doesn't have very much of. The downside is, I think we all agree that staffing the jail with sworn officers is not the most effective use of our sworn officers. The opposite is also true on the other side. You know, if we want to fund it, the problem with funding it again is the money. If we open it, no matter how we staff it, there are costs in the general services department for maintenance and cleanup of the numerous toilets and other facilities in the jail. There are also some costs for the personnel department to staff up for their nurse practitioners. The new facility has 2 medical facilities, which will need to be staffed, while the current facility only has 1. The source of funds we've identified for those costs are the funds that are currently in the Capital Finance Administration Fund, identified and budgeted for in-car video. I know that caught a lot of people's eye. I want to say that the CAO is not in any way pulling any support for this project. I think the in-car video money was in Cap Finance because it was identified for as the first payment in a possible vendor financing agreement, which we don't have. We're not even really started negotiations on that, and we're already in December. The fiscal year ends in 6 months. Most of these vendor financing agreements are paid either biannually or quarterly, often in arrears. So it's our view that even if that in-car video negotiation and approval and everything moves at an amazing pace, that first payment on that won't be due this fiscal year. For cash concerns, we're recommending, as we did in the operational plan, that money be used for current issues, and then we'll identify funds in next year's budget to cover that program on an ongoing basis. Obviously, the departments are here for any operational questions you have. I can certainly speak to any of the financing questions.
Chief?
Good morning, Mike Moore, Office of Special Operations. I'd ask Mr. Tiefenk to address you first regarding the funding recommendation.
Good morning, panel. Richard Tiefenk, Executive Director of the Board of Police Commissioners. Just on behalf of the Police Commission, I want to strenuously oppose the taking of the money for the vehicle in-car camera system. The camera system in South Peru has been operational and since about 3 months ago now. As you're all aware, we have just completed a response from the Inspector General on bias policing. Part of our transition agreement with the court, although it does not require it, it does reference in-car cameras. It does reference them throughout the entire city. We see this as a step back because this has occurred once before where $5 million was taken out of the budget in the past and not put back in the budget. And we need to get all 4 of the divisions up and running with in-car cameras. The Commission is committed to this. We understand the fiscal situation. We understand the need, but this is a citywide need of a piece of technology that will certainly enhance, and at the end of the day, we believe save us money in the area of civil claims that would come about, less time needed to adjudicate personnel complaints, et cetera. So on behalf of the Board of Police Commissioners, we would strenuously oppose the removal of these funds, and we also will strenuously oppose it as it relates to the CAO's recommendation to take some funds out of this account to also balance this year's budget.
Okay, don't leave yet. Anyone else? Okay.
I would, excuse me, Jerry Chaliff, Los Angeles Police Department. Having been the person who negotiated the $5 million, the original plan was $5 million for South Bureau, then the next year would be $5 million for Central Bureau, and the $5 million for Central Bureau disappeared out of the next budget, and we know that next year's budget will be more difficult than this year's, and there is great concern that the money will not be reallocated. The reason we have Teams 2, which is probably the leading risk management information system in the country now, is because the council in its infinite wisdom set aside some money, and to quote a presidential candidate, left it in a lockbox, and it stayed there. And so we had, even when there were issues where the money was needed for something else, the money remained, and we got Teams 2 built.
Mr. Thank, a couple
Yes,
of
sir.
questions. From the commission's point of view, have they given us any alternatives or any?
For the money, sir?
For the money and or the program that's before us today?
For the money, no. We just received the report. I received it this morning, so the commission hasn't even had a chance to review it yet. So I think for the funding, no. Although there have been, and we have provided the CAO with some additional revenue projections that we have for fiscal year that we're in currently that will provide some additional funds this fiscal year based on two items. One is the increase in the false alarm fees. We estimate this year that the increase in false alarm fees based on payments made through December 6th, that will have an increase of approximately $700,000. The next increase is going to be more significant. As you're aware, Councilman, we have proposed and is in the process of being drafted by the city attorney, effective April 1, electronic payment by the official police garages that has been in the past made quarterly. So if it's done April 1, we'll recover cash this fiscal year for five payment periods: April 15, April 30, May 15, May 31st, and June 15th. That, in conjunction with the $15 increase on the vehicle release fee, we estimate will bring in about $3.2 million cash this fiscal year.
How much of that is the fee increase alone? Because when you're all you're doing is taking money from next year and moving into this year.
We'll get a one-time bounce out of the electronic collection, but it's a $15 increase, so I'm going to guess it's about a $1.5 million increase in vehicle release fees based on the vehicles that were impounded and released through November 30th.
So you get close to funding the amount in question by these two actions, you think?
Absolutely.
I appreciate that very much.
And as to the option plans, as you well know, when you had the joint committee with the commission is certainly most desirous of that does not require police officers in the jail.
Yeah.
The point is the department has to open the facility, at least that's their desire, January 30th, and whatever plan the department would support bringing forward to get that done with the least fiscal impact, but yet get the operation moving is what the commission, I believe, would support at the end of the day.
Thank you. I appreciate what you're saying. I know Mr. Parks and the committee that sits here in about a half an hour will feel the very same way about that. It's a commitment we made a long time ago to get the Zinc-Art video moving, and it's problematic for us to give up that money. So we're going to discuss that in a moment.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
If I could add one thing.
Yes.
Based on the conversation we had last week about our operational deficit, if the money's not taken out, we still believe we can meet our budget goals for the year.
Okay, good morning. As to the operational impact, as Mr. Tiefenk indicated, this is a matter that's been before the department now for well in excess of a year. September of 2009, the department began reporting to the Board of Police Commissioners its plans, its efforts to utilize the new MDC facility to transition from Parker Center Jail to that new facility. Since that time, there's been a number of options explored. The correspondence that is before you from the CAO reviewed the options 1, 2, and 3, as well as options 4 that have occurred and been presented to the Board of Police Commissioners through June of this year. The department in this year has identified that the need to transition from Parker Center Jail to the new MDC is one of safety and security, as well as the efficiencies. The Metropolitan Detention Center is effectively open. It has been completed for well over a year. utilities, power services are on, and in June of this year, Property Division resources were transitioned from Parker Center to the Metropolitan Dispatch Center, to its new facilities underground there. That was a result of the life and safety issues that were occurring at Parker Center to Property Division, where frequently there'd be human waste and other substances that would be dumped on the employees and so forth there from faulty sewer systems of PAB. With the population, or with MDC now having Property Division personnel there as well as administrative staff from Jail Division, the department is required to operate security at both those facilities. Both the MDC, where it has a front counter for the release of property and servicing of those needs, as well as security of that facility now 24/7, as well as the ongoing services at Parker Center Jail with the arrest and custody and release of prisoners there. This transfer would allow us to shut down the Jail Division at Parker Center. It would allow us to further consolidate our services into the MDC and gain efficiencies, as well as improve the safety of our custodial personnel, our detention officers, as well as the prisoners themselves. It will also only leave behind in PAB 2 floors, the second and fourth floor for SID personnel, and again, they'll help us by reducing that counter space.
When will SID be out of there?
We are, as you may be aware, the Piper Tech build-out of the SID facility is ongoing. It's anticipated that will be 18 months. From now.
From now.
Could be as late as 18 months. We have a challenge in front of us, which is in January of 2012. We've been given a temporary allowance to remain at PAB by Building and Safety and the Fire Department. There are extensive fire watch requirements and so forth that allow us to remain there. Again, the move from Parker Center Jail to the MDC will help minimize the impact of those ongoing requirements. Additionally, as to the CAO's report, it was issued just late Friday. We did look at it over the weekend. However, we've not had an opportunity to meet with the CAO. Its staffing requirements were based on our March projections, and needs to be pointed out to this committee that its identification of 44 additional personnel that would satisfy our staffing needs is an error. The department does not agree. In our March report, option 1 reported 44 additional personnel were needed, but it also stated that there'd be another 18 personnel needed because of attrition, and this was also prior to the implementation or more than doubling of furloughs. When those factors are added, we multiply up to the 83 officers and 5 supervisors we have today. So at the end of the day, the math ends up the same, whether they're detention officers or they're police officers. For us to continue jail operations with the new MDC and its requirements because of its centralized design and less efficient operational footprint there, we are going to place 83 police officers and 5 supervisors that will allow us to operate the MDC, continue operations of 2 other regional jails and 3 area jails. The report also indicates that through the department's plan, we plan on closing 4 area jails to harvest or gather 56 personnel. This committee needs to be made aware that 3 of those facilities have already been shut down. We've already harvested those personnel because of the ongoing vacancies that we are struggling with within our detention officer ranks, as well as our senior detention officers and our principal detention officers, which were not mentioned in the CAO's report. Finally, it is the department also recognizes the 2 other recommendations as to additional custodial staff as well as nursing or medical services. It is, the department has not had an opportunity to meet with general services or personnel regarding those 2 recommendations. And again, the department sees us as transitioning custodial services from one facility to another, that we are not adding facilities, whether it be for medical services or custodial. We plan and anticipate that the custodial services that are being presently provided at Parker Center Jail are going to transition to the new MDC, and that we're going to be able to allow to shut down Parker Center Jail. The medical services that are presently being provided in Parker Center Jail are going to transfer to the new MDC jail. And while there may be additional stations and so forth, the department would look to work with personnel department to consolidate their activities just as we are with ours, so that we can deal with this new facility's designs and its requirements in the most efficient manner possible. At the end of the day, the staffing for this, again, is not our best option. It is the least worst option. And with that, I'm joined by Chief MacArthur as well as Commander Krober, Mr. Chaliff, obviously, to answer more detailed questions should they arise.
Thank you very much. First of all, for the record, we've been joined by Councilmember Cardenas. That brings us to a quorum, and if you concur, 1 through 4 will sign as consent. So that is the committee action then. Back on item number 5, and then a couple quick questions before I turn to my colleagues. One of the things I understand is you intend to take the officers after their first out-of-academy assignment to the divisions and on their first wheel into the jail. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does that create a retraining problem for them once they leave the jail assignment? That would be how long would that assignment be?
I'm sorry, I missed that one word.
Okay, after the first wheel out.
Yes.
How long is that assignment to the jail is going to be?
It's going to be 6 DPs.
6 DPs. Now, is there going to be a retraining issue because those skills you pick up in your first couple of years on the job are perishable, and you go out of your first 6 DPs into a jail for 6 DPs, you have a tendency to lose a lot of those perishable skills. So
the department has, first of all, as you know, those recruits will spend 12 months in the field working a police patrol assignment. They will spend 6 months in this wheel or jail assignment and environment, and then will transition back out to the field. During that 6-month period of time, the department has, with the added supervisors, taken particular pains to continue to provide ongoing training, to ensure that their skill sets remain relevant and fresh. And should there be any deterioration, obviously we would work to address that and ensure that that did not occur. It is my belief, having been a graduate through the wheel system and working the jail some too many years ago, that that skill set will be retainable during that period of time.
Okay. To the CAO, the general services costs, were they not in the 10-11 budget already?
The general services costs for Parker Center Jail are in their base budget, but the MDC is significantly larger. I think the number that sticks in people's heads is the difference in the number of toilets needing to be cleaned. Just a visual for you.
Thank you for that.
But
wait, you see what I give you for Christmas.
The sheer scope of the facility is barely comparable between the two, and it'll take significantly more people to make sure that facility doesn't degrade quickly. So that's the.
So we didn't budget for it. We didn't put anything in the UB for it.
Did not put any money in GSD for transitioning to the new facility.
Okay. Now and staying with the CAO, staying on the issue of the in-car video. If we were to accept the department's recommendation, and I'm not so sure that gets to budget and finance yet, but if we were to accept that, was there any guarantee, and I think the commission needs it, I think the council will probably need it, that we let the mayor know in no uncertain terms that in-car video must be funded in next year's budget, no matter what has to go?
In as much as it's the mayor and council that adopt the budget, certainly you could put a statement into any approval of these recommendations that stated that as strongly as you could, but ultimately you'd be telling yourself that you have to.
I understand the system. I just want to make it clear that we put on the public record, if we do this, that we're making a very strong statement to the mayor that we expect to see it, and then if he doesn't, then we'll put it back in and take it out of something else, maybe his office. Okay. I wish I could read my notes on this next one. January versus later in the year. Chief, why not hold off a few more months? We've already held off too long, but why not a few more months?
Well, this is a facility that's been ready to be occupied for more than 18 months. It is a facility that its design takes advantage of today's modern standards, but also today's modern requirements. We are operating presently in a facility that's more than 60 years old. We've had an emergency allowance as to its continued custodial operations since the early 60s. The present use of both buildings increases not only all the fixed costs are there and are being incurred. This will allow us to improve the safety of the arrestees, the safety of jail personnel, as well as the elimination of a facility in Parker Center, which we believe that consolidation will reap savings both in personnel and other costs. And now, versus 6 months from now, the city's budgetary and dire fiscal situation does not appear to be a sunrise in 6 months. The department's aware of no plans at this point to reinitiate hiring or fund that hiring 6 months from now. The chief has made a determination of these 83 as the only last option available to him to allow us to transfer to this new facility. But even then, it must be said, continued attrition is occurring within jail detention officer personnel, and those attritions are the present number that's been identified will only carry us through June, the end of June. We generally lose every 60 days 3 more detention officers. And so the fiscal 11-12 poses an additional challenge for the city and for this department, and that is to restore hiring just for the base level of what we have. So this is a situation that is not improving.
Well, I understand that, but that makes the assumption that the baseline remains the baseline, and that is that we don't say hire detention officers in the meantime. When I talked to Chief Beck recently about this, he said, as you said, this is the worst possible choice I could make, except all the other options out there are the worst. So nobody likes this option. But I think you can have some hard times convincing some council members. I know Mr. Rosendahl was just informed that there's 20 officers being moved out of his divisions. For him to say, I'm willing to give up 20 officers to go to the jail, when the easy fix to it is hire more detention officers, and that is stay now in the FSR that's going to be discussed today, say now begin the hiring of the detention officers so we can be ready in May, June to open that facility up with a full cadre of budgeted detention officers rather than wheeling out sworn personnel.
Again, if I might, just the safety of our arrestees that are in that facility is a concern. The safety of our existing personnel that work this facility, the existing facility, is a concern. You have a state-of-the-art facility located 100 feet away that remains vacant.
Okay. Well, my suggestion would be, regardless of what we do today, and I've seen the conditions you're talking about. They're deplorable. They're an embarrassment to the city of L.A. That you do a good job in the next few weeks as best as possible of getting some members of the council rather to see it so they understand that argument, because I think it would fail on just the concept of, well, this is not a very good situation and we're going to take some cops away to go out and fix it, versus if they actually physically go see it, and if they physically see the deplorable conditions that we're putting human beings in, whether we like them or not, they may say, okay, I understand. So I think it's in your best interest to get some of our colleagues out there. I've taken the tour. I know what you're saying. So.
We will do that.
Mr. Reyes.
Again, for the record, looking at these reports, they just came out on Friday. Everyone's digesting it. We're trying to understand these impacts from a bigger picture point of view. When we speak of where the officers would come from, is there, do you have anything in writing that speaks to where we would lose officers in the city if they can be transferred to conduct themselves within this facility?
The department will manage the resources from the pool of officers, if you will. There's 9,927 as of this morning, 9,927 sworn personnel, and we do not identify 7 from one division or 5 from another. It's every 28 days the department balances its available resources based on the demands for services across the city, and this is going to be another burden on that total finite number of resources, but I'm not prepared today for us to say that it was going to be one particular officer from one area versus three officers from another. It will be a shared burden across the entire city.
Given the shared burden, I understand that. We still should be aware of where we are either losing or gaining officers. And to the extent possible, could we even get a snapshot of where we could be losing? I'm not asking for it today. All I'm saying is that you're making decisions. It's your discretion. And should your discretion have an impact on our districts, that's something we should be aware of.
We can make that available going forward.
Okay. Now, from the arrestees' point of view, what is the condition today? Councilmember Schmidt, the chair, has already acknowledged it's unconscionable, it's intolerable. Once we see it, we'll understand. But when we look at different ratios, if you will, arrestees per cell, I mean, we've had some good statistics in how crime has gone down in the city. We've got some very good indicators of that performance. How does that reflect itself within the prison cells? What, are we overcrowded? Are we bursting at the seams like they are in the county jail? Can we get a picture, a snapshot of what are we dealing with when it comes to the conditions for both the arrestees and how much are we engaging in terms of what it takes to control that population?
Good morning, I'm Scott Clover from the Police Department. We don't, you have to keep it in perspective. Sometimes we have the media come out and they want to film the jails and they understand we're on the verge of opening a new facility, so they want to know what kind of overcrowding we have, and they ask questions like, how long do people serve sentences? We have to explain we're a Type 1 facility. People don't serve sentences in the LA City jail system. However, we do have crowding fluctuations. We balance those so that any one facility, as it approaches or is at capacity, we can balance that throughout the system and actually transfer throughout the system prisoners from one facility to another. The single largest problem we have is not just an overcrowding problem per se. It is more about the aging and the decaying of the infrastructure. With the MJS being opened in 1955, it was certified in that same era to have 150 prisoners. We are set up and established and allowed to operate 440 beds, but it's actually certified for 150. So given the seismic weakness potential of that facility and the connotations for a catastrophic fire, when you look at the conditions of the HVAC system and just the physical plant and how it has done an admirable job and has done more than we should ever have asked it to do, its time has come and gone. And from the standpoint of safety and advisability of keeping as many people as we periodically do, throughout all the weather conditions and so forth, the time has come to vacate that facility.
So what I'm trying to get at is this notion of opportunity cost. If we're going to be taking one step over another, what is the downside? So for me, what you're sharing is, I understand it's not a containment issue of arrestees, it's really the safety factor and how we move bodies from one place to another. Would that be accurate?
That would be, yes, substantially accurate.
So do we have a sense of ebb and flow? I mean, in traffic you have peak hours, right? I mean, morning, evening, you got cars coming and going. Are there peak hours in arrestees? Is it Friday nights? Is it Saturday? Do we have down days that are not as strenuous, not as active? Is there anything like that that speaks to how you handle your data and look at your trend analysis? Is there anything like that that is available?
Yes, prepares reports on that with charts and so forth, so that there's a graphical representation of the data, and they track that on a weekly basis.
So my assumptions are there's a correlation between poverty, density, crime. Geographically, certain jails have some activity that has more profound conditions that are more, how can I say this, dangerous, safety is minimized because of those conditions. Could those correlations be established?
Well, I think that'd be beyond the statistical data that we keep at the jail division, and might be beyond what I'd be able to answer without, maybe meeting with you on in a personal meeting to better understand what you're trying to get, what the data sources I'd have to draw that from. But you have to understand that when the jails begin to fill, we balance them. And so at any given time, it is our intent not to have a jail, wherever it is in the city, regardless of who's in there, who's been arrested, and so forth, at capacity.
Gotcha. One last question. In terms of infrastructure, parking for either employees, officers, and or folks who come and visit, what's the parking like in terms of one facility over the other?
The parking for the new facility is essentially the same for the old. It's the parking at this point in time across from the old Parker Center on the east. And so that was one of the first things we looked at as we began to plan to bring employees into the MDC, is where we're going to have them parking and so forth. So there's really, it's a zero-sum game in terms of parking.
And just for updating the record, what are the plans? What's planned for the facility that we will be leaving behind?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that.
I believe it's demolition.
Demolition.
I think.
Yes,
Well, that's pretty obvious.
that it's demolition in
If it
terms
doesn't
of the
fall
parking.
down.
That's pretty obvious. I'm talking about the use of the space.
But I don't know, the city has not made a decision on that.
I believe that's under a study that hasn't yet been completed.
Understand? All right. Thank you.
If it lasts that long, if it doesn't fall down on its own, we'll demolish it. For the record, we've been joined by Councilmember Perry. Mr. Cardenas.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have a separate report from Department of General Services on this particular matter, because it's unfortunate that we're getting the perspective from the police department, because the perspective that they have to go on is the constraints and or the budgets that they've been given, and yet GSD is a separate department with separate responsibilities, and it's my understanding that the actual detention officers work for GSD. Is that correct?
No.
No, they work for
The maintenance people.
I'm sorry, part of the budgets are from GSD.
Maintenance people. Yeah.
Okay, so, but there's a panoply of budgeting here, and it's unfortunate this isn't the budget committee, but that is the backdrop of all of the decision-making and the recommendations that are coming from the CAO and the department. And it's unfortunate that we really don't get to, as policymakers, see or decide what is the most cost-effective, regardless of what the 2010-11 budget says. Just looking at what's the most cost-effective. So one of the questions I want to ask is, the 6-month, what was it called, rotation or wheel? 6-month wheel for the new officers. Instead of going in the field, they would be going into the jails?
Well, they transition from a field assignment to the jail and then back to the field.
Okay. Why 6 months? Why not a year? Why not longer? What do the sheriffs do? Don't they have some kind of wheeling process with their newer recruits?
I can't say. I'll let
The sheriff's process, from somebody who had some experience with, is much too long. And if you leave people in the jail for a very long period of time, you do lose training, and also attitudes get developed that shouldn't.
Okay, but the sheriffs, how long do they do theirs?
The sheriffs will go anywhere from a year to 5 years, depending on their need, and they are not field certified when they go into the jail. They come out and then they have to go through a field certification program that lasts a year. It's quite different than a municipality.
Okay.
And they've had significant problems because of it.
Okay, all right. But my question comes back to our city and our budgeting. Is there no impact whatsoever to rotate our men and women into the jails for 6 months, our sworn officers?
This is seen as striking a balance of training them for 80 hours, 83 hours. They'll spend 6 months, 6 months of time in the jail, and then allow them to rotate right back out to the field with the minimal, if any, degradation of their field proficiencies. They could stay longer. It's the department's desire is to make that rotation as to have the least amount of impact on these officers.
At least amount of impact when it comes to their abilities to do their work, but it's my understanding that there's also potentially an impact when it comes to benefits or some kind of requirement financially to an officer if they're out of the field for over 6 months at a time.
There's two things that we are looking at. One, historically, we have done this in the past, like Chief Moore, myself, was wheeled to the jail. The department historically and today still believes the training aspect is minimized with a 6-month rotation into the jail. So that's number one. So we looked at historically, and we looked at the impacts that was asked earlier by Councilmember Smith regarding the training impacts. We feel we can have the least amount of concerns with that 6-month rotation. The second piece of it, I think that you're referring to, is the field bonus if a P2 were to go into the field once they get off probation. And that was looked at. We don't want to hold back any of their bonus if we can afford to do that. But when they wheel, they have not received that field bonus yet because they're P1s. They don't get it while on training. So this would impact it for a 6-month period of time versus a longer period of time.
Okay, so that is actually one of the considerations in determining whether it's 6 months, 7 months, 5 months, 12 months, 9 months, 13 months, 182 days and 5 hours. My point is, how did we arrive at 6 months? What are the factors in the 6 months?
Well, that's what I was saying. How we arrived at 6 months, the second piece that I just talked about, that component that you're asking, was just an added look at it. We looked at the impact. How long does it take to train an officer to get up to speed in the jail? And we have 2 months. 2 weeks. So it's very minimal training that they need to get up to speed to handle the jail. Then we looked at the deterioration of training, and we know between 6 months and 12 months is generally a good arena. We feel very confident when you move them into the jail. We've got the concerns that Mr. Chaliff had spoken to. When you're dealing every single day with individuals who've been incarcerated versus your average citizen on the street, there's different dynamics that start to occur. We felt 6 months is a good amount of time. Then we move the individuals back out into the fields. They don't lose the training that they just had encountered for the last 12 months. They lose minimal impact to that. So we looked at it really from a training perspective, and we felt that the 6-month rotation was the way to get our officers to assist us with the need that we have right now, because we do not have enough detention officers, with historically how we had success in the past, and then with also letting them pretty much hit the ground running when they get out of the jail. Anything after 6 months, you're going to start to lose some of your skill sets.
Okay, but on an hour-by-hour basis, which is more efficient or more effective when it comes to budgeting? Having a sworn officer working the jails or having a detention officer working the jails?
Well,
I
clearly,
hope that's a black and white question.
it is, and clearly the department, and Mr. Cardenas, my apologies, you may have missed this point when we made it. The department is pursuing this option not as a matter of the most desired path. It's the least undesired path. There's every option before us. We would like to be able to hire detention officers. The use of a detention officer per hour, per day is at a lower cost. However, the department has not been able to hire additional detention officer personnel, and have been facing this dilemma for some time. It appears it's going to continue to face this dilemma for the foreseeable future, and this option allows us to transition from one dilapidated and very dilapidated facility to the new state-of-the-art facility right next door. And the use of police officers in place of detention officers, while it's undesired, it is a last resort at this point.
But I asked a simple question. I thought it was black and white. Hour by hour, which is more efficient budgetarily, using a sworn officer or a detention officer?
It's cheaper at this stage because of the...
Please don't use the word cheap. It's overutilized in our society. Less expensive, or, you know.
Whatever okay. It costs less.
There you go.
To use sworn officers at this point because of the differential in pay. The people who are coming out of the academy, in fact, initially are cost the city less than the detention officers. Because the new police officers make about $10,000 a year less.
What's the category status of a new police officer when they just get out of the academy? What are they called? A P what?
P2. P1.
P1. That's what I
and they're
thought.
making approximately $45,000 a year.
So you're telling me the department is only utilizing P1s to do detention work?
We're using P2s, but they're...
See, so that really gets to my real question.
But they're less expensive than detention officers still.
A P2 is less expensive than a detention officer?
Under the new pay schedule that was approved with the league last year, they make less than the initial detention officers.
A P2?
Yes.
Okay. You know what? I would love to see that in writing, because I thank you for being succinct in your answer, but I would love to see those numbers in writing, because I find that hard to believe. because I don't deal with your budget on a day-to-day basis. I'm not even on the budget committee anymore.
I think that disparity continues for what, about 3 years until the P2s actually catch up to the detentions?
It continues
Number
for
of years?
10 years
10 years.
before, yes, and we need to rectify this.
Yeah.
But it continues for 10 years in terms of the pay scale with the new agreement that was agreed upon for the cost savings, the quote shared sacrifices that the union participated in with the negotiations last year. But to answer your question in terms of the cost also, part of the thing is there's more step raises, so after 6 months, they start to become more expensive as well. I apologize, I did not understand your question before.
But they're still less expensive than the initially higher detention officers.
We can lay out all the salary differentials, I think, pretty succinctly on paper for you.
But with all due respect, I don't want to see an ideal answer as far as if we used P1s exclusively, but I want to see who are we using and what is the real cause and effect budgetarily as to who's being put in place to act as a detention officer when they're a sworn officer, and at what rate are those individuals being paid.
Okay, if I could stop the discussion just a minute. For the 4 gentlemen who are here on the fire department, the meeting for the Budget and Finance Committee is going to be in the council chambers on the 3rd floor beginning now. So if you go down to the 3rd floor and fill out a card there, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
But is it
And
going
I'll
to be
try and
as
catch
much
up to you.
fun? Is the budget meeting going to be?
Oh, no, they're much more boring,
Oh, okay.
believe me.
All right.
All right.
It's debatable.
Yeah. Oh, and for the record, Mr. Zines joined us.
Thank you. Now, I want to ask a question when it comes to furloughs. It's my understanding that detention officers are being furloughed?
Yes.
Okay. What kept us but we're calling them officers, and it's my understanding in the budget, Mr. Chairman, again, I'm not on the budget committee, but my understanding that public safety personnel were the ones that we were going to try to protect from furloughs. And most every other department, every other category is being subjected to furloughs. Even non-sworn within the police department, correct, are subject to furloughs.
The detention officers, I think most of them are coalition members. The others were EAA, a few. They were included. We did not get an exception for it. We've discussed that with the CAO. They're right now being furloughed at the 26 furlough days a year.
What's the department's preference? Would you prefer that we had given you an exemption for the detention officers?
Yes, because then we would save some of we would eliminate the need of transferring some of the sworn officers into the jail.
The second component of that Chief Moorhead alluded to also earlier, actually spoke directly to, is we also tried to work earlier to have attrition-based hiring for our detention officers as well. So not just the furloughs, but the attrition-based hiring.
Like we have for sworn officers.
Yes.
We have an attrition-based hiring policy right now, correct?
Yes. And so those were things that we had asked for, and it was declined.
Okay. So you're getting to my last point, Mr. Chairman. I know you got a committee to go to, but so 9,963 officers is the attrition. When we have attrition, we're going to try to keep that number of officers, give or take a few, on the force, sworn officers. But it appears that what really is the backdrop of all the consternation on this particular item is, as long as we keep trying to keep 9,963 officers, thereabouts, sworn officers, on the police department, all of the other police departments' budgeting is being constrained dramatically, even to the point where we're actually pushing sworn officers away from street work and into what is otherwise civilian work, or in this particular case, detention officer work.
We believe, after the review,
Who's we?
the department, I'm sorry,
Okay.
believe that we could hire the detention officers and still stay within our budget. It's just that, based on what was adopted by the council, with the hiring plan that was in there, with the issue of managed hiring, that it's if we were allowed to hire, we could hire. It would add to our civilian budget, but we believe we have enough. We will have enough in the sworn account to make up for that, even with hiring for attrition.
Mr. Chairman, I thought the department was already over budget.
So there's some dispute about that.
Yeah, well, that's to be discussed this afternoon and next week, too, so.
We don't believe we are. In fact, we believe even without looking at the salary accounts, we have a small surplus.
Well, I'm glad for your confidence, but at the same time, what really is bothering me as a policymaker is it appears that the big elephant in the room is the 9,963. Every time we try to protect that, every time nobody's willing to go there and say, if we didn't have to keep 9,963 officers at any given time, the department could actually manage policy-wise these particular matters, such as who's going to be working the detention centers, a bit better.
Well, the 9,963 is an average. As of today, we're at about 9,930, 29.
I keep saying thereabouts.
Right. And we believe that the way we have laid out the hiring plan, we could still do the hiring of detention officers, and we'll have an issue with PSRs, the people who answer the 911 phone calls also. But the way not a complaint, but a comment, the way the city's budget system works, every time we want to hire somebody, we have to get permission from city council and the mayor and the police commission first. So we're in this position of trying to plan without the budget for the detention officers. We have discussed with the CAO, gotten estimates of how much it would cost to hire detention officers, to hire to attrition and to hire them in general to replace, if we'd like to replace all, but if not most of the sworn officers being transferred in, it's certainly something that we can present. We have the numbers. We've gone through the analysis.
Mr. Chairman, as I am the chair of the Information Technology Committee that also oversees GSD as well, I note that one of the recommendations from the CAO's report is to shift some of the in-car video funds over to permit that the council, if we chose to, we could choose to move some of the in-car video funds and empower the department to go ahead and use those funds to hire more to possibly use that to fulfill some of the furlough problem that we have right now with detention officers. I would certainly agree with that recommendation from the CAO because the in-car video process is behind. It is done in phases, and I think that recommendation is right on when it comes to real-time money for this particular budget year. Thank you.
Ms. Perry?
One comment I wanted to make about the old site. I don't know if you are all aware that Mr. Miller has been working from the CLA's office on developing and creating a process so that we can have a discussion on the record about what to do about the old building, and there is some preservation concerns about the mural in the lobby and how we go about preserving that. So there hasn't been any decision made. Some people have floated some ideas around, but until we get that process set up and people can put their ideas on the record and we can do it in a way that's public and publicly vetted, it's still sort of in flux. But if anybody has any ideas that they want to offer, please feel free to offer them either to me by email or to Jerry Miller, Chief Legislative Analyst, so he can incorporate that into the process that he is developing.
Suzanne?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologize for my delay, but I was at ceremony for Dr. Martin Luther King in the Valley. The police department's over budget by how many millions of dollars?
We don't believe we are.
You don't believe you are, but how much have they said you are?
We have still discussing with the CAO about reimbursable overtime. Based on our analysis after the last Budget and Finance Committee, we believe we have a surplus without taking into account the salary counts of about $600,000.
So approximately 600,000 over?
No, we have a
under
surplus.
Budget?
Yes.
Is that correct from what your figures show?
Our FSR, while I understand all of this is constantly under negotiation, certainly right now, it's not our belief that the department's overall budget is in a surplus.
Well,
what is the belief from your perspective?
I
heard 11 million. I don't know if that's up or down.
I don't know what the most recent negotiated number on what we're reporting is, but I think
so they think they're under and you think they're
our
over.
office the CAO is of the position that the department's overall budget is significantly in dollar terms, not actually that significant in percentage terms, but noticeably in the deficit.
Well, I heard 11 million. Is that somewhere in the ballpark?
In the ballpark, yes.
Well, and
Well, there's a huge gap between 11 million deficit and 600 under budget.
I will be more than happy, as I'm going to do on Wednesday, at the request of the Chair of Budget and Finance, to come to the council and explain where we believe the differences are. And the one caveat is, we are not budgeting for the $9.5 million for the uniform allowance, which the CAO...
Probably a large portion of that 11.
Yes.
Okay, wait. The uniform allowance, which was due this month,
I think it's at the end of the month or the beginning of January.
and you're not budgeting for that yet? That's part of the MOU that says you're supposed to get it?
At this point, we have not been told to budget for it. The question was whether the savings were achieved, and then if they were, where the money was going to come from.
And if the savings were achieved, then they were going to get it. If not, they weren't going to receive that.
Then the question is whether it comes out of our budget or somewhere else.
And we're going to resolve that by when?
Hopefully, you'd have to ask...
Later today?
Because I've heard some conversation of officers who are anticipating that money coming in, and that the city, we have an ERC meeting tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock.
It's on the budget agenda right now downstairs.
Yeah, they have budget.
Okay, well,
I'm sure that issue will be discussed in the context of the FSR.
I know that's not the issue that we're discussing right now, but it's going to make a lot of officers very unhappy when they think they're getting that, and they've anticipated that, and then if we don't give them that, I'm sure you're not going to have a lot of happy people,
I'm sure.
especially in this economic situation.
If the city tells us, if the council or the mayor tells us that they meet their goals and the $9.5 million is to be paid, and then it's to be paid out of a budget, we will find a way to pay the $9.5 million.
But somehow the accounting needs to be accurate from the department side and also from the CAO side, so we don't get numbers that are so uneven that it makes us look rather dysfunctional. If a department's saying we've got a surplus, CAO saying they're in a deficit. I mean, we're working for one city, and we should have one set of books and not multiple books. As sometimes appears, we have the public record and then the secret record.
All I can say is that when I took over the job of the department's budget, I vowed that we would always agree on the numbers with the CAO. That's why we're still talking. At this point, there's one number we don't agree on, which is anywhere between 3.7 and 0, which has to do with reimbursable overtime. Every other number we agree with. And as Mr. Crawford said, one of the issues is this $9.5 million, where it comes from. If the department is required to pay the $9.5 million, then we will be probably about
11 million under budget.
Now we'll be probably about 9 million in deficit, which is less than 1% of our budget. But we're doing it. And remember what Chief Beck said. It is his pledge and our goal that we will work to be within our budget for the year. And that's what we're doing.
Okay. Well, let me go on to some other issues. The delay that the officer is going to encounter when they're going to the regional jail. Some jails have been closed. Some areas don't have divisional jails. The promise at one time, like 9 years ago, that we would have a shuttle service provided where officers would take the individual to a station of assignment, leave that person there with the booking, go back to patrol, and someone would then take that individual over to a regional jail for processing. And if we continue down the same path with the officers coming out of the field into the jail, working as detention officers, fewer calls handled by officers in the field in black and whites, more delay in booking and transportation. You can just imagine from Topanga Division, as Chief Moore is very familiar with, to Van Nuys, the drive time, waiting in line, booking, getting an MT. Now we're going to deplete the field force and calls for service, and response time goes up. Instead of that promise that was made when West Valley Station was rebuilt, that we're not going to put a jail in here, we're going to have a transportation service provided. Where is that whole proposal?
Okay, as to, well, first of all, the department's well aware of each of the concerns you've identified, whether it be handling the calls for service or response time to those calls for service, the transportation burden that the officers have to move arrestees to regional jail facilities, versus an area jail. There are wait times there, including the medical treatment that's required, and has taken steps in each of those areas. And would ask that as you look at our response times, you look at the manner in which we're handling not only emergency calls for service, but routine and urgent matters. They are at historical lows. They're very efficient. Our men and women are doing very good work in that regard. We have also taken steps, for instance, specifically in the San Fernando Valley, to have transportation details that officers who make arrests, such as Topanga and West Valley, on nights of the week in which there are expected heavy flows of arrestees, or, as Councilman Reyes indicated, there are an ebb and flow of workload, that we anticipate those, and we do have transportation details as warranted. We do not, however, staff transportation details 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, because it would not be an efficient use. Officers, there are times in which an officer may make one arrest the entire 12-hour shift that individual works, and it may occur early or late during that shift, and their transportation of that arrestee to a regional facility encounters a 12-minute wait time at that booking, or less. That's the average that we have today. The jail division has done extraordinary work establishing a medical treatment option where arrestees now during heavy peak periods are actually receive their medical treatment reviewed by detention officers or by jail personnel, rather than having the officer, as you have in years and decades past, stand
Years, not decades, years.
Years past.
Decades.
Stand alongside an individual while he or she was being seen by a medical professional. So the department, again, is aware of each of these and is actively and aggressively managing them to minimize the impact on public safety and actually maximize the public safety.
So the department's conscious of that, because I know that
Absolutely.
we've discussed this for a long time, and it's kind of like, okay, well, it just needs to be pushed aside. Meanwhile, the officers in the field keep getting longer and longer delays. They say a 12-minute wait at the jail, but the commuter time, as you know, from one end of the valley to the other end of the valley during 4, 5, 6 o'clock at night is obviously a lot worse than it would be at 3 o'clock in the morning.
And again, so I can be clear, we have transportation details. The bureau chiefs of each, by a direction of Chief Paysinger, have been given the discretion to establish a transportation detail made up of a police officer to transport a series of arrestees when that makes an efficiency over them transporting them individually.
Is there a criteria for that, or is it just we have extra personnel this day, or?
Well, it's not we have extra personnel. It's the operational management of a watch. Friday night, for instance, in the valley where arrest flows are anticipated to be higher versus a Tuesday morning where arrest flows are not anticipated. A task force such as a DUI task force or a prostitution task force. Those are instances in which, again, watch commanders at the direction of their area captains would relegate 2 officers and a van to transport those in a bulk setting, if you will.
And they have the vans deployed?
Oh, yes, we have each of our areas have multiple 15-person vans that can be done there. We also have jail buses should that need arise, but those needs are not arising as been described.
But we haven't transferred those bodies out yet either. The ones to the jail, the officers to open up to the Metropolitan Detention Center.
When that happens, the department believes that we believe we have sufficient staffing that while we will have to move these 83 personnel to accomplish this, that the impact on an individual district or individual area will be, our effort is to keep it invisible. Our effort is to allow processing to occur so that it isn't impacting service times and the officers' abilities to patrol the streets in the 21 areas of the city by operating this facility.
And we're going to be monitoring that on what scale?
I'm sorry?
We're going to be monitoring that, the delay, on what scale? Are we going to have a monitoring to determine with the 83 officers being assigned to jail?
We monitor jail processing time as an ongoing matter. The ComStat process in the department monitors response times regularly, as well as a number of other factors. That these are all metrics that the department looks at regularly.
And then we will be able to review that to see if it's working or not. And if it's not working, then we need to explore some other options.
Yes, presently there are notification schemes within jail division itself that they notify their commanding officer if there's an operational delay because of some detention officers weren't able to make it to work, or somehow there was a task force that wasn't previously announced. If there are delay in booking times, then the Captain Farrell, who's here today, is notified off hours himself to ensure that steps are taken to minimize those impacts.
Okay.
Councilman, let me just tailgate on what Chief Moore indicated. He talked about ComStat, and that's a periodic process, but because of the specific nature of opening this facility, it's a huge facility, we anticipate that there will be problems with the physical plant, things that just break down because they're new until they're used, and you stress test them. And the fact that we're using personnel traditionally not assigned there for a variety of reasons, we're going to be looking very closely at this operation in comparison to the other regionals. There's probably 20 separate criteria that we're going to be looking at, including the MT time to wait for MT time elapsed, time to wait for booking, the elapsed time for the booking process for that facility and for that facility in comparison to the other regionals. I'd be happy to share with you the entire criteria, what we're going to look at, and try and monitor for efficiencies and so forth.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that as we take more folks out of the field for non-patrol functions, including the 83 we're talking about, and I know some captains have had to take uniformed officers out for administrative responsibilities, et cetera, is that response time starts to grow higher and higher, deeper and deeper, then we look at to say, how are we going to counter this? And I know that to me, it's like a balloon, where the chief has this balloon, he squeezes over here, it pops out over here, squeezes over here, pops out over here, and while the department's responsible to run the organization and public safety, we look at the dollars, and then obviously we nitpick dollars because there's only so many dollars in the pot. How are we going to balance it out? And I continue seeing that. It's not that we're opposed to public safety. We support it. I don't think anyone in council is opposing it. It's just how do we afford it, and how do we blend it to make it work for everyone's benefit, and I'd be interested in seeing that. And when I go and work the fugitive detail, and I'll sit in jail and wait to see if it's 77th or Central, and how long that wait is, and how speedy they go along, or how it starts to back up. And I know what you said, if there's a task force, it starts to back up. If it starts to back up, and radio calls start to back up. So we just want to make sure that we're doing everything in the right arena. Let me tell you about the other question I have. Is 9963 has been a magical number. And we came up with 9963 with the trash collection. Well, somehow the 9963 came about. The magic number, 9963. And when we imposed that trash collection fee, full cost recovery, it was stated that would free up general fund money to help maintain 9963. But at that time, we never really considered the other aspects of the civilian personnel, of the communications personnel, which I understand are on furloughs, and all the other aspects. If you don't have anyone handling the 911 calls, you don't have anyone booking the bodies, you don't have any detectives following the cases, the system really falls apart. And I think somewhere down the line, we have to look at 9963 and say, we want to provide public safety. Is 9963 a magical number? Or are you able to then use some of those dollars that are generated out of the general fund because of that, I don't want to say extra money, but money that was moved because of the full cost recovery, to hire civilians in the jail, in the clerks, in the other aspects of the department. Because if a captain has a responsibility to deliver that service, it's not only black and whites, and it's not only detectives, but all the other reports and all the other activities that they have to perform, and they don't have the bodies to do it, yet we're stuck to this number, 9963. And if we took half of them and put them in administrative activities, we still have 9963. It's not that they're doing police work, but we got 9963. It's become that magical number that I think we're so glued to, and the reality says maybe we need to do something else with the dollars to make sure they can deliver the service that they need. Because I know a captain, I'm not going to tell who he is because I don't want to get him in trouble, and I know that you'd look up and say, what are you doing? He had 13 civilian personnel in his command. He's down to 3. And I said, what are you doing to take care of what the 13 were doing? He says, I've taken officers out of the field, and they're doing what the civilians did. So these are uniformed officers.
We have that report coming back. The analysis was already done by the department. We found a lot of flaws in it, so that report's coming back.
And the final issue that you mentioned, Mr. Cardenas mentioned on the in-car video, and take those dollars and swap them over. If we swap them over, then what bureau would be affected by the lack of in-car video?
Central.
Pardon me?
Central Bureau is the next bureau up.
And how close are you to implementation of that?
It'll probably not be till the end of the next fiscal year.
And if we pull that back for some other purpose, that gets back.
The question is, do we ever get it back?
If we ever get it back.
Right.
Okay, well, I know that, and I know that it's a huge challenge, and I respect what the command is doing, but you've got all these things that you're juggling, and trying to make everybody happy and provide public safety, and they're throwing more into you to juggle, and you've only got two hands, you're juggling, so I empathize with that. At the same time, while we nitpick, is that we're looking at a budget next fiscal year, it's going to be worse than this fiscal year. And going back on the uniform check, if the officers don't get the uniform check, I'm sure you're going to have lots of unhappy officers that have been anticipating that, have been promised that, and anticipated that would come along the lines at the end of this month.
Okay, we have one public comment. And
I'm not done, but now I am.
Yes, you are. Yeah, as long as I got the chair, you're done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Jason Elias?
You're not to like it.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, as the public comments before us,
Then we'll act.
Okay.
All right, how are you? Well, Jason Elias, SEIU Local 721, Coalition of LA City Unions. I am not the expert on this issue for the union. However, sitting here, it's been very educational. I am as confused, if not more confused, as when I walked in. I appreciate some of the black and white questions that were asked. Who is cheaper? Well, cheaper is not the operative word. More cost effective. I still don't know. I mean, whether a civilian or a police officer is more cost effective, whether we have a $600,000 surplus or a $11 million deficit. The bottom line for me and for the union and for our members, civilian members whose job is not to develop an attitude in the jails as they courteously process and take care of prisoners through the system. This is a career for them, and the fact is civilians are hired in our jails to do that job adequately. We've heard the discussion over and over about 9963, and the fact is if we are hiring police officers in order to keep the city safe, we need them out on the street doing police work, not in the jails. So it sounds like there will be more reports forthcoming from the CAO and from the police department as they work out their budgetary issues. Our suggestion going forward is to move to eliminate the furloughs, which would essentially give you 30 more officers in the jails, which is what we need. And when the department comes back to Budget and Finance, which I understand they're coming back to Budget and Finance in short order, is to discuss the further funding of the detention officer positions. But we believe that civilians are much more, would be much more cost effective to use in the jails.
Thank you very much. I know Mr. Reyes and Mr. Cardenas have a couple of additional recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a report back, if we can get a better sense of the impacts, perhaps on a monthly or every 2 months, of how the personnel is shifting, if we'll be pulling out officers from the field for the jails, what is the impact? And if we can get that indicator, if you will, give us a better sense of how the area is being impacted, that would be a big plus, I believe, for a lot of us. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no objection, that'll be added to the report. Mr. Cardenas, you had another recommendation on GST?
I just agreed with the CAO's report and their recommendations, but also that we get a report back from GST on the impacts to their department of all the personnel and overtime and things of that nature that they're impacted with the detention centers.
Okay. And then lastly, ask the CLA to check with the mayor. We had a discussion some time ago on this in this committee, requesting that we seek state legislation which would allow our arming of detention officers so they could be used as transport officers. Now's the time to get a bill in the legislature if we're going to do that. I'd like to hear from the mayor's office on that point. And then finally, is the intent then of the committee to move this forward to Budget and Finance with these requests as well for report back? Yeah. Okay. That'll be the...
Committee members, John White, City Clerk. The CAO has two sets of recommendations. Recommendations 1 through 3, I believe, relate to the use of police officers at the detention center, and 4 and 5 relate to the use of civilian staff. Are you recommending approval of 1, 2, and 3?
Hang on. Oops. wrong report. Recommendations. Okay, one, yes. Two, obviously, the in-car video is going to have a big discussion of budget and finance, so just be ready. Three, so yeah, 1, 2, and 3, and then do we need 4 on the addition?
Yeah, I'm not ready to do that.
Okay, so 4 and 5 have to be held at this moment. So 1, 2, and 3 with the additional report backs suggested by Mr. Reyes and Mr. Cardenas, and then we will take the budget issues up in budget and finance.
And this next goes to council?
This has to go to, well, I think we need to, we have a placeholder for Wednesday. This is the last budget committee meeting as well, I think, today.
Actually, this is scheduled for a special council meeting for Wednesday, so if you wish to not move it forward,
Let's go ahead and put it forward, and I'll have a discussion with the chief. Well, Chief, if it doesn't get heard Wednesday, then it goes into the first week of January. Would you still be able to meet your January plans if we did that? So we can have a discussion with Mr. Parks about the budget issues first? Yeah, we're doing the mid-year adjustments now. Maybe we'll check with the city attorney. I think we can probably have that discussion today.
Item number, I believe it's recommendation number 5, that goes to the upgrading of 10 senior detention officers. The department's original request was to upgrade 12 detention officers. There's some 23 vacancies currently, and this is as part of the plan for the 83 police officers and 5 supervisors. If there's no action taken as to recommendations 1, 2, and 3, the net effect is the department intends to open up the MDC and to utilize the existing custodial staff and medical staff.
Yeah.
As to item number 4, which I believe is the $850,000 of salary to hire detention officers, it's unclear to me, and Mr. Chayla, who's gone in budget and finance, may be able to better identify, but that amount I don't believe will fund. I know it will not fund sufficiently to eliminate the need for police officers. What it may do is it may eliminate or nearly eliminate the deficit for the furloughs, which would be 27 fewer police officers. So as to your actions, if this committee in Budget and Finance take no action, the department will continue to move its plan to open up this facility on January 30th, 2011, using its existing resources.
I think what we would do is this committee is not take that action, but we will have the discussion, and I think because it's the FSR mid-year adjustments that are taking place right now downstairs, we can still have the discussion downstairs and have the CEO a chance to look at those numbers. It will come up. So that'll be then the action.
So hold the item in committee?
Hold those 2, yeah. No, the other 3 go forward with the 2 changes, to hold the other 2 in committee.
Very good.
But Budget and Finance could authorize them downstairs.
Send it to.
Yeah, and then I could waive it out for Wednesday, right?
You can waive it, items 4 and 5. Items 4 and 5 are not referred to budget, so if they want to address those items, if they're able to in a separate context, they may. I don't know what's before them.
We'll see. If we can do that.
You could waive them, budget could address them.
Then I could waive it.
And refer it back to committee.
Yeah. If we can do it, we will do it. And then I'll just waive it out of here, so it's in council altogether.
Okay.
That's it. We're adjourned. Thank you.